In Paleolithic cave paintings found in Europe, you can see woolly rhinoceroses, giant elks, imposing antelopes, aurochs, bears, hyenas, lions, cave lions, and even mammoths. So many creatures that no longer exist today. What should we point to? What are the reasons for this disappearance? Part of the answer is found in this room, the other seems to be linked to climate change. Because at that time, our planet, which looked like this, changed in just a few thousand years from a dry and cold climate with polar regions covered by huge ice caps to this. And when the sea level rises by 120 meters and local temperature variations can reach 15 degrees, it causes a lot of damage. Between 15,000 and 11,000 years ago, near the end of the last ice age, 7 of Europe's 23 large mammals went extinct. And in North America, over the past 50,000 years, 33 out of the 45 large creatures that inhabited this continent have disappeared. Among the victims were 5 species of equids, western chamois, several saber-toothed cats, and species of mammoths including the mastodon, llamas, deer, giant ground sloths, short-faced bears, and American lions, just to name a few. All of them have joined the Great Book of Extinct Species, but the strangest thing about all this is that most of these species had previously survived 3 periods of glaciation and warming. And even though some large herbivores went extinct due to changes in their habitat, and even though the scarcity of prey may have led to the extinction of their predators, that doesn't explain everything, because where the spotlight shines the brightest, it's pointed at us. Many researchers seem to observe that these extinctions almost always follow the migrations and growth of human populations. It is observed that almost everywhere in the world, a large part of what we call megafauna, meaning animals over 40 kilos, began to decline or even disappear after the arrival of our ancestors. In South America, a continent that was little or not at all affected by the great glaciations, 46 out of the 58 large creatures that lived there have been wiped out. Canis de Ros is gone, the glyptodonts, giant armadillos weighing nearly 2 tons, the giant sloths, megatheriums, all presumed victims of the arrival of the first humans. In this regard, Australia is surely the continent that fared the worst, because here, 15 out of the 16 members of the megafauna that inhabited the island continent were completely eradicated in a relatively short period of time after the arrival of our ancestors, around 50,000 to 65,000 years ago. Many studies suggest that in just tens of thousands of years, small human groups with stone tools and fire radically changed their environment. Using a hunting technique that involves starting fires, probably to bring down their prey, the first humans would be responsible, directly or indirectly, for the disappearance of Genionis newtoni, flightless birds that could weigh up to 200 kilos and stand 2.5 meters tall. But also Diprotodon, the largest known marsupials, Thylacoleo, the marsupial lions, Megalania prisca, a kind of giant monitor lizard, and Dromornis stertoni, birds with a wingspan of 3 meters that must have weighed nearly 500 kilos. The disappearance of this megafauna, along with the practice of fire hunting, would have led over time to profound changes in the vegetation cover and the quality of Australian soils. Around 40,000 years ago, the rainforests began to retreat, gradually giving way to dry grasslands and eucalyptus forests, eventually leading to the arid landscapes of Australia that we know today. Here, warming is probably an aggravating factor, but strangely, almost all of these species had survived for 2 million years through several glacial and interglacial periods before the arrival of the first humans. On a global scale, over the past 50,000 years, 80 species weighing more than a ton seem to have disappeared in the wake of the latest human arrivals. In fact, only one continent really did well, and that's sub-Saharan Africa, where only 2 out of 44 members of the megafauna became extinct. And some scientists suggest that the large animals living on this continent did better because they had the chance to live alongside us from the beginning, and so had time to co-evolve with us, learning to know us and to be wary. In North America, those who survived the spears, bison, elk, deer, reindeer, musk oxen, bighorn sheep, or mountain goats also seem to tell a story in their own way. Because almost all of these survivors are descendants of Asian species that have lived alongside humans for a long time and, like humans, crossed the Bering Strait. And the craziest thing about all this is that these extinctions all happened at a time when only a few million people at most populated the entire world and over periods of several thousand years. But more recently, everywhere else, it was different. In Madagascar, within just a few centuries, almost all of the island's megafauna disappeared after the arrival of the first humans. Elephant birds, giant tortoises, pygmy hippos, and 17 of the 50 species of lemurs, including the Paleopropithecus, which was the size of a chimpanzee, the Megalodapis, the tree-dwelling Murians, which were the size of orangutans, and also the Archaeoindris, which was the size of a gorilla. All of them have been wiped out. In New Zealand, barely 2.5 centuries after the arrival of the Maoris, 10 species of giant flightless birds had disappeared. Among them were the astonishing moa, creatures completely without wings, which could reach over 3 meters in height, and in their wake, their predators. The Haast's eagles, the largest birds of prey ever known to have existed, would also become extinct in turn. As for the Pacific Islands, it is estimated that 2,000 bird species have been wiped out there since the arrival of humans. That is the grim list, probably not complete, that predates the modern era. And at the top of that list is the iconic dodo, which disappeared from Mauritius. When the Earth had 600 million humans today, there are now about 7.6 billion of us. And in the meantime, we have become even more powerful. A single species perhaps sums up our ability to transform the world around us, the passenger pigeon. A bird with a ridiculous name that lived in North America and whose population, at the beginning of the 19th century, is estimated at a minimum of 5 billion. In short, there were a lot of them. Until a few thousand farmers considered this species a pest for their crops, and by the beginning of the 20th century, there were none left. Wow! And the story goes on. Steller's sea cows, the great auks of the North Atlantic, the cagoose, all pushed toward extinction. Well, in itself, it's not necessarily a problem for species to disappear, it's even natural. It's believed that 90 to 99% of all species that have ever existed on Earth are already extinct. The vast majority disappeared as part of a slow and gradual extinction process. The rest disappeared during about 20 more or less intense crises that the Earth has gone through over the past 540 million years. Most of these crises were caused by major volcanic eruptions, movements of tectonic plates, or even asteroids. But the last one is caused by this one here. Homo sapiens' Western lifestyle doesn't care about mankind. Welcome to the Holocene mass extinction, a crisis that, due to its scale, can claim the title of the 6th mass extinction. Because it is, in short, on a global scale, and the number of extinctions over a short period is comparable to the 5 greatest mass extinctions our world has ever known, all of which led to the disappearance of more than 75% of species. To be clear, we haven't hit that number yet, but I don't know why. I think we're feeling lucky. Because while our ancestors led us into this crisis gradually, mainly by wiping out large animals, over the past century, we've clearly shifted into a higher gear. And now, extinctions affect species of all sizes and on a completely different scale. Today, it's estimated that 1 in 8 bird species, 1 in 4 mammals, 1 in 3 amphibians, and 70% of all plants are at risk. Great job! By studying the average extinction rate of species over the past 2 million years, researchers have found that for all mammals, there is 1 global extinction every 700 years, and for amphibians, it's 1 per century. Currently, this rate is 1,000 times higher than normal for the former, and 45,000 times higher for the latter. What fine would we get for going 45,000 times over the speed limit? In the last century, 200 vertebrate species have gone extinct. Normally, to reach such a rate, it would take more than 10,000 years, and it's still strange to think that a mass extinction is caused by the activity of a single species that's in the same room as you. We humans are the Holocene asteroid. And then, it's not just the number of species that's drastically declining, but also the size of populations, meaning the number of animals or plants from a given group in a given area. In total, it's estimated that we've lost half of animal populations in just 2 human generations. Since the Industrial Revolution, the number of wild mammals has been reduced 6-fold, and the number of marine mammals 5-fold. And the area available to species is melting away like snow in the sun. Almost all terrestrial mammals have lost at least 30% of their historical range. Since 1940% have lost more than 80%. Imagine if my 20 square meter apartment shrank to just 4. There were 100,000 cheetahs at the start of last century. Now there are just 7,000. There were 50,000 lions 25 years ago, and now there are 35,000. And orangutans have seen their population decrease by 80% in 75 years. The causes are diverse and varied. Deforestation, intensive agriculture, roads, urbanization, pollution, poaching, overexploitation of resources, introduction of invasive species, climate change, human overpopulation, and above all, overconsumption. And these iconic animals, like the panda, the tiger, or the polar bear, are just the tip of the iceberg. Because we rarely talk about invertebrates and plants, whose populations are also declining massively. An estimated 42% of terrestrial invertebrate species and 25% of marine invertebrates on Earth are threatened with extinction. In Germany, a recent study showed a decline of more than 75% in the population of flying insects over the past 30 years. In short, it's a real massacre. Nature is in decline everywhere. Except perhaps for those that keep us company or are destined for our butcher shops. An astonishing figure, nearly 70% of the biomass of all birds on Earth is in the form of farmed poultry. Chickens weigh more than all the wild birds on our planet, and the cows and pigs we raise make up 60% of the total weight of all land mammals combined. On the scale, humans, and to a lesser extent their domestic companions, account for 36%, while wild animals make up only 4%. There you have it, the Industrial Revolution has left its mark. Since the Neolithic era, we've added a few more strings to our bows. They come in the form of chainsaws and airplanes. We invented excavators, concrete, and above all, overconsumption. Fortunately, behind this nightmarish picture, there is some good news. This runaway machine is one that we built ourselves. So we should be able to slow it down, transform it, rethink it. Let's get going. Being optimistic means seeing an opportunity behind every calamity. And with great power comes great responsibility, especially since humans are the only species capable of saving the others. Follow me, I'll cover you. To make a difference, I admit I don't have a miracle solution. Blaming our ancestors is pointless, and waiting for perfection means doing nothing. We all have contradictions. I grew up on Reunion Isle and have flown excessively. I would be in no position to lecture anyone. I know I'll never see a dodo, a moa, or a giant beaver. Those fascinating creatures disappeared from North America 12,000 years ago. But I would really like our children to be able to see orangutans. We need nature. It's our pantry, our pharmacy, and it's also just beautiful. Sometimes that matters, food for the soul. And at this point, there are no small actions. To convince yourself, if you think you're too small to make a difference, just try sleeping with a mosquito in your room.